Welcome to No More Carbon Copies. It's the podcast for high-performing leaders with big goals who feel stuck trying to reach the next level. At Vivera Leadership, we believe no two leaders are the same. The best leaders perform at their highest when they understand what makes them unique and stop trying to lead like someone else. This is where we explore how to see ourselves clearly, address self-sabotage, and lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. You don't need to be a copy, you just need to be you. Welcome to No More Carbon Copies.
Today, we get the privilege of talking with David Fox. David is a longtime colleague and friend of mine. First met in 2012, and David has a long history both in the Air Force and is an intelligence officer and is a expert in the area of taking care of customers and making sure that customers not only are happy, but they're retained over time. And it's a privilege to have you, David. Thanks for being willing to jump on today.
Roger, always a pleasure to see you. And I'm glad we picked the right uniform to wear today, which is smoky gray. I don't know what uniform that is.
Yeah. Yes, we did. That's all right. So today, the topic is the concept or the idea of what helps leaders transition either as they move from one role to another role within the same company. Usually that's a higher level senior position, or when they're moving from one company, either because they want to or they don't want to, and they're starting at a new company. So that in those transitions, there's opportunity both for success and opportunity, obviously, for failure. So in your experience, what are some of the pitfalls of that? What gets in the way of leaders transitioning effectively? What have you found to be effective for yourself? And what kind of things do you think are effective for folks who are going through that type of transition? What have you learned through the years that would be helpful to them?
Well, probably important context to share that I was an Experian for 20 years. Though I'd moved, progressed through different roles, hadn't really thought about a role transition, and certainly not formally. When I left Experian in 2019 to join CM Group, which is now Marigold, I, was faced with this reality that I really needed to have a plan going into this role. And certainly in an executive role and a senior role, that I should not have any expectation that the CEO that I was going to be working for was going to tell me what I needed to be doing the first 365 days, especially in that role where he was like, I need you to come in and hit the ground running. So, one of the things that, and you'll hear me kind of reference a book that I read back in 2019 called The Executive Transition Playbook. That's written by Hillary Potts.
Appropriate name. That's good.
Yes. And from that book, I put together what I would call my own personal onboarding journey. I took that book and I just created my own checklist. And I would say, since I started using that in 2019, and I moved through several different roles at Marigold. And then as I transitioned in 2024 to a whole new organization, very, very similar role, but, new challenges. It was really, really invaluable. And so I really leaned on that, my transition checklist. I've also, over the last couple of years, when I knew people were transitioning in new roles, I shared with them my checklist. And so again, I would encourage you, if you're moving into a new role, read this book. But I'm giving you a little bit of a shortcut here, and hopefully today we'll be able to talk about like what I would encourage as your first 360 days and your next. So years 1 and 2, and certainly you could modify this to if you're going to be in a role for the 3 to 5 years, sure, you can do that as well.
I know when I've transitioned, I've personally made some assumptions or done some things early in my career that really hamstrung me or hindered me from getting up to speed. And we're trying to talk about how you get to a point where you're adding value that justifies your role, justifies your salary, justifies why someone brought you in. How do you accelerate that so that you're more effective? You avoid some of the delay and rework that has to be done, and you can add value as quickly as possible. So Dave, if you just talk about before you're going into the role, before you're actually on the ground, what are some of the things that you think are critical?
Yeah, I think it starts during the interview process, right? So you ask a lot of questions. You don't ever want to go into it again if you're moving internally or moving from one role to a new organization, you should be asking a lot of questions before you ever. So you should have a pretty good idea of what you're walking into. Like, what are the big challenges? What are the teams doing really well today? What are the teams not doing really well? And if it's okay, maybe I could just talk about, the way that I broke this checklist up was there's the first 30 days, then I've got 30 to 90, 90 to 180, and 180 to 360. And I really believe if you follow these first 30 days, you're going to hit the ground running. You could call it onboarding. I call it listen, ask, observe, learn, and connect. And the big one, I think if I could just start there, is you have to understand what the organization goals and targets are. Before you jump in and make some assumptions about what your team's supposed to be doing, first ask that question about what is the organization trying to achieve as a whole. Then that next question is what are the team goals and expectations? This is a pretty busy 30 days, but I promise if you did all of these things, then you're already making a difference. You need to do a financial deep dive. It's really important to understand what the current team metrics and do some benchmarking around those metrics. Hopefully they have all of those metrics together. If they don't, well, that's a key learning right there that you need to understand about how the organization's been managed in the past. The first week I'm in a role, I'm going to have one-on-ones with all my direct reports. Here's another little, maybe I call this a pro tip. What I have personally found successful is I always start working from, some people like OneNote, not that big of a fan, but if you're working from Google Docs or just a Word doc, I'm always really prepared for these meetings. So I'm going to go into this very first meeting with my set of questions, and I'm going to document those. I've been in my new role. It'll be a year in November. All of my direct reports, I could go back to the first meeting. I've documented those. I don't go back to, that far typically, but every week I go back and look at the previous week's meetings and look at what we talked about and what we agreed on and what we said we're going to do, because just to try to do that from, a notebook or memory, it's just, you're not going to be successful. So one-on-one's really important.
So
doing that. Yeah. Go ahead.
So let me just interrupt you for a second. So your first week you come in, you're asking questions. What, in your experience, what's the balance between asking questions versus setting the foundation of who you are as a leader? So I've seen people kind of emphasize different things. I certainly have an opinion about this, but I'd love to hear you talk about in that first meeting or in that first week, how much of it is you kind of trying to kind of plow your leadership stuff versus I'm learning, I'm listening, I'm ears open.
Boy, we're just going to jump in with a controversial question early on, right?
Yeah, we are. I love it.
This is a great conversation. I would say at least 90% listening, asking questions and listening, maybe 5 to 10%, 10% maybe on the high end of like talking. Like there is, I have in my experience trying to go in and prove to people what they don't really care. I want to hear about what's going on. Like I'm going to formulate an opinion. And as I get to the end of the 30 days, I'm going to kind of start formulating what I believe. Again, what's not working, what is working, what do we need to stop, start, and continue? I think by asking questions and listening, I'm going to have a really good idea about where we are at the end of that 30 days. This should not be a 6 months to figure out what's going on there. If you're really asking the right question and you're really listening, you're going to know at the end of that 30 days. And one of the things that, I talk about as being one of the deliverables at that 30 days, I should go back to my leader, whoever that is, president, CEO, or it could just be a manager or a VP, and just share with them, like, I think it's important to test some of those assumptions with your leader, right? Like, here's what I know about what I think your goals and objectives are. Here's how you're performing against those. Here's what I think is really, really important. Here's who I think is going to get you there or not. And, assuming someone in their role is paying attention, that they're going to have opinions about what you share with them. And because you've been listening and you've been asking questions and you've been observing, you're going to have a lot to share with them. You're going to have a really robust conversation on that 30-day mark to say, hey, am I understanding my scenario here? And I'm also going to give them some of my, here's what I think that our goals should be over the next 30 to 90 days. Because guess what? At the end of that 90 days, you're going to go back and you're going to say, hey, got some more observations for you. Here's where we were supposed to be hitting the marks. I think there's also kind of there's a lot in this first 30 days too. You need to be compiling those key themes and observations, but you also need to be thinking about what are 2 or 3 quick wins. And I would say 2 or 3 quick wins should all be around what's going to make the people's jobs easier and the customer's experience better. As I always tell my teams, like, if you're doing things that aren't improving the customer experience, then please raise your hand. Let's stop doing that sort of stuff. Like, and that makes, not only does it make a better customer experience, it makes a better employee experience, right? You can't have a great customer experience without great employee experience. So freeing up time for your people to focus on customers, which typically in my world, in the customer facing roles, that's what people really care about. Really, they care about delivering for customers. So if you're going to make that easier for them, like your first 30 days, that's a huge, huge win.
Sounds like what you're talking about is, hey, I'm going to go in, I'm going to keep my eyes open, keep my ears open. I'm going to learn as much as I can. And some of that is I have fresh eyes. I can ask some questions. I can have a different perspective than what is normal. I can create understanding of what is currently happening, and I can pay attention to, for you, it's like, what's value to customers. For someone in a different role, it might be, where are we missing value add opportunity? Where are we where are folks distracted? What's become normal that probably needs to not be normal anymore. But because you're listened for 30 days, you now have a well-informed opinion, as opposed to the idea of just kind of coming in and just making some assumptions and rolling from day one.
And by the way, listening and learning and asking questions is not just for the people that work for you. What do your peers hear about the team? What are the executives? You know, if you're in a senior role, you want to talk to the CFO. Like, one of the first things that I have on my checklist for the 30 days is get a financial overview of the organization. Like, how are we performing? Are our margins good? Are our margins not good? Are we, spending too much on X and not enough on Y? So, because then you're going to be, as you have those conversations with peers and the people that work on the executive level, your questions are going to be a lot better when you talk to people on your teams. When they say things like, "Don't understand why we're not staffed up by 25%." Well, you've got a financial perspective, so maybe you can ask some different questions, and you're like, "Or I don't know why we're not spending 20." You will know because you've had those conversations with your CFO and with your product people. So, where are the product people stand?
Yeah.
And your sales team, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. You've kind of laid out this idea of like, hey, when I come in and transition, I'm going to ask questions before I get there. I'm going to spend the full 30 days when I get there interviewing people, asking questions, going through a checklist. On the flip side of that, why do you think people don't do that? Because I've worked with a lot of leaders who come into organizations, and not everybody does that. Right. I wonder whether it's because they have already a kind of a predisposition to think that I have to prove that I'm worth the job. And so I have to come in and share my expertise rather than spend that time listening. They feel like taking 30 days to listen is taking too long. Does that make sense? Like they don't want
yes.
to delay.
Yeah, and it's easy to get sidetracked on the wrong stuff, right? Because what's helped me is by sticking to a plan like this, I'm not going to get redirected to one particular problem with one customer. Let's face it, you go in any role, there's probably one customer who's having a pain point at that particular time that, sure, you could jump on a plane. Maybe it could be appropriate in that scenario to do that, but you could get sidetracked really, really quickly. And I think that's why really sticking to a very, very well-defined plan as much as possible. I mean, I know you have to be flexible. Things are going to come up. Your boss is going to want you to go, spend a week with him and, in in a different office or something like that. But yeah, I think that happens a lot as people get distracted. And again, you really have to have a good understanding of what the organization's goals and objectives are, because those are going to shift if you're in most organizations, you're going to come in, and I've been in scenarios where you come in and they've got 50 objectives. And you're like, okay, guys, I'm probably not in the first 30 days going to go stop doing that, but probably 30 to 60 as I'm talking to them about how we're going to establish a strategy. That's when I'm going to say, look, we're going to focus in on how do we create better engagement with our customers? How do we empower our employees? How do we amp up efficiency? We're gonna do those things, and what are the couple of objectives around those that we can execute in the next quarter that are going to drive those? Because those are the things that are going to drive the team objectives and drive the organization goals and objectives. As you can tell, I'm a big OKR person. I live and die
Yeah.
by OKRs.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. The first, anything else about the first 30 days?
Again, another, I'll just keep saying pro tip is don't wait for people to reach out to you. Like, don't go, you know what? I think the
Oh, yeah.
CFO probably will get around to talk to me at some point. It's like, schedule time with he or she may not have enough time. Same thing with your peers. Like, you're like, oh, maybe they'll reach out to me some point. I'm new. Like, no, they will really appreciate you reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'm new. Tell me the lay of the land. I've had
Yeah.
that happen. I had it recently for someone who started in a role as my peer in a different business unit. And man, within 2 weeks, they reached out to me and said, hey, I'd love to just spend 45 minutes. Tell me what you know about this place. I was really, really impressed. And I think it really accelerated his introduction to the organization.
Yeah. Love that. That's a great pro tip because it is true that a lot of people go like, hey, I'm the new person. I want people to reach out to me. And what you're saying is like, no, let's be assertive. Let's get out there. Who do I need to talk with? And really harvesting as much information as you can as quickly as you can in that first 30 days.
And don't get the I have to use the old cliche that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so I think that is also can be applied to relationships. I mean, I just know again in this role, there are people that probably in the first 90 days that I really wanted to establish a strong bond. And for whatever reason, they were really busy and they couldn't. And I didn't give up on those people, right? It wasn't like they must not like me or, they're too distracted, whatever. Like I try to be pretty persistent in relationships so that the people that I need to align with, people on a sales team, people on the product team, that, I'm continually pursuing those relationships. Don't give up on people. Don't give up on relationships. Again, another pro tip there.
That's good. That's good. All right. So walk us through, okay, first 30 days, really important, probably the most important. Then what are the themes or the things you're trying to do in that next?
I call them the next 30 to 90, sharing key observations and establishing strategy. So I created kind of my own operations assessment and it could be different if you're managing multiple teams like I am. Like you look at one team and you go, oh wow, they're a fairly proactive team. Like they've got good processes. They stay ahead of their customers. Then you have some other customers who are kind of like fighting fires. I'd call them reactive. So just doing that assessment, I like to do this like start, stop, continue exercise with my leaders. Really important in the 30 to 90 days, I would do a town hall in front of all your people, all your teams. Like this is one of the best introductions that you can do. What I have done in the past is you want to be realistic, but you also want to be positive. Like here's the things that we're doing really well. I came into this role and I'll say the people are so smart and really amazing. And that is just the flat out truth. Like from leadership to individual contributors, I was amazed. And so talked, maybe shared some stories. Then I talked about some challenges, some things that I observed. And I said, here's some of the metrics I've seen or some metrics we don't have yet that we're going to have. And then start this whole conversation about if you're not familiar with OKRs, this is what they are. Don't make an assumption that everybody's, black belt. I don't think OKRs have black belt, but that everyone's, been using OKRs for 10 years. Maybe this is the first time they've heard it. So you can do a quick 3-minute overview and talk about here's what it is and here's why it's important and here's why it's going to be a benefit to you. It's going to make sure that you're not working on 20 things that are maybe important. You're going to be working on the very most important things that are going to drive value to customers and make you better at your jobs.
So can I interrupt you for a second there? Because I think I'm just kind of thinking.
Because I'll talk all day.
One of the things that triggers in me is a question about how you think about how the people that you're coming in to lead are adjusting to who you are and how you're coming in. So you're introducing a new concept. For you, it's OKRs. Like other leaders, it might be something else that their management style or the way that they do stuff. How do you lessen the amount of fear or concern or uncertainty that happens when there's a transition? Because when you're coming into the new role, you are the transition. Like you are the thing that people are fearing most of the time. And they're fearing the new leader. They're fearing what might change. They're fearing, those kind of things. So how do you, you're in front of your folks for the first time?
If you have been listening, you've been asking questions, you've been listening, you've been observing, you've been asking follow-up questions, you've been following up with people when people ask you questions, responding to every email. It's just like, to me, it's just a core part of leadership. So it's like when you tell people, reach out to me anytime, people probably will. Please answer quickly. answer thoughtfully, be consistent. And again, you're probably not going to alleviate fears in the first 90 days, but just be consistent, right? You'll have fewer fears in 180 than you had at 90, than you had at 30, because they're still trying to figure it out. Again, it's why I would strongly discourage coming in and going like, this is the things that we're going to be doing. You probably don't know enough. Like you could say in generality, we're going to deliver a better customer experience. Yeah, right on. Yeah, I think people would be like, that sounds fantastic. But if you say, we've got too many X or we don't have enough of these employees, people are like, what is he talking about? Like, has he been listening at all? I think one of the things I would do in the second 90 days, do skip level interviews. I want to say that it was one of the most valuable, and probably the first 30 days, I had a CSM reach out to me and say, can we just have a conversation? And I was like, yeah, of course. I'm through. This was a very high performing CSM. They just kind of shared some really important challenges, not that just they were having, that were impacting all of the customer success managers. And it really helped solidify an idea that I had some ideas about how we should be segmented. And I had this conversation. It's like, man, she's hitting every point that I think I've heard. Like having that conversation with her, and as we announced those changes, and I went back to her and said, hey, your feedback really, really helped me. It really helped establish that relationship with her because I knew she was a key influencer. That's the other things in the first 30 days, you're going to pick up probably on the leaders and the people, individual contributors that really had the most influence. And you're going to have to figure out, are they going to be with me or are they not?
Yeah.
Not to say you need to throw them out of the boat in the first 90 days, but you figure out who the people are that are going to be ones you can rely on.
It's good. I have this thought in my mind, see if you agree with this, that the people who developed the job description, interviewed you, and hired you probably don't have the level of detail, the level of expectation, level of understanding about what's really happening as you will after the first 30 days.
Absolutely.
So when you're transitioning into the after the 30 days and you're starting to talk a little bit more with your team, are you also kind of re-educating some of the people that your peers and folks who brought you into the organization? Are you educating them on, hey, here's what I'm finding. Here's what's really happening.
Yeah. One of the things that I list as, your first 90-day objectives is, and again, I am super diligent about updating my boss every week on where we are across OKRs, across metrics, everything, so that he never has to guess what's happening. And hopefully you need to advocate for making sure that, can you get in front of the executive team to share these? I mean, one of the things I've enjoyed about my current role is that we have a monthly meeting that includes the CFO and the CEO, and I get to talk about where we are, where our performance stands, and it's really helpful to me. I mean, they know so much about the organization, and it's a very collaborative meeting. So I get to really test my theories every month to say, hey, here's some of the things we're focused on, and you can see the results, or we didn't have the results that we expected, and here's why, and where can you help me with that? Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think we've all worked with people who are not that transparent, and they wouldn't have that level of transparency with the folks above them. They would try to kind of shield the organization, and I'll tell you what I want you to know, not what you need to know. And so it sounds like you're more of a advocating, hey, the more transparency you have with the organization as a leader, the better that's going to be for you and for your team and for everybody moving forward.
You probably remember a CEO that both of us worked for that used to say facts are friendly. He's right. I probably say that once a week. Like people get freaked out. I'm like, hey, can you dig a little bit deeper into these metrics? And they're like, whoa, why is he asking this question because he wants to fire some people? No. Look, we need to know what the numbers are. Let's start from there. Don't ever be afraid of what the numbers are. Yeah. It's either going to inform some areas that need big improvement or, cause for celebration.
Yeah. There's earlier in my career, I was taught by somebody that, hey, one of the requirements of leadership is you have to be able to look at the truth and acknowledge it's true. So you don't live in a dream world. And that's why I think that whole idea is facts are friendly is a sense of like, you cannot make meaningful leadership influence. You can't make decisions. You can't think about strategy. You can't think about people if you're not looking at what's true. Facts are friendly. You got to look for them.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. So what's next? What's next on your strategic plan?
I would also just really quickly on that first 90 days. I mean, if you're in a customer facing role, and this would be, I mean, probably apply to a sales role, but certainly in customer, like do a line by line in your first, 90 days. Like, always advocate getting out in front of your customers. And sometimes you will have opportunities in those first 90 days to get in front of your biggest customers. And certainly you should know your top 10 customers, but at a minimum, doing the line by line review.
But like for people who don't know what a line by line review is, they're probably going like, "This is over my head." What's a line by line review? I know it's
Yeah.
simple, but just to get out of the jargon, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, and it can look a little bit different for different organizations, but the way that I treat a line by line is I want to know for every single customer, where are we? What is their revenue? What's the contract look like? Who owns this account? Who's the CSM? If you've got, other teams that are attached to a client, who's attached to that client? For our organization, we have professional services, people that are assigned to accounts. So I need to know who are all these. Typically, what I have these CSM present their clients. So who the client is, what the contracts are, when the renewal is, but then what's the current state of the customer? Also, what's their health score? Hopefully you're scoring your customer's health, but what's the customer's health score? What's their CSAT? What's their NPS? What's the current state? What
Yeah.
are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And where do they need help? That's kind of the general format of a line by line.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that you're a big, kind of implementer of like, you have to know the health of your customers. What's the health of the account? What's the health of the engagement? And you have a certain formula. Doesn't matter what that formula is. There has to be a formula. That's a good thing. The first 90 days, at the end of the day, here's where we're generating revenue. Here's the state of those accounts. Here's the health, the risk, all those kind of things.
Yes. And so 90 to 180, and I named this one step into action, not to say that you shouldn't step into action on day one, but really there's kind of a lot of like true things that need to be executed on in that 90 to 180. So that you finish the 6 months successfully. Again, when I lead different teams, I'm a big advocate for monthly business reviews of those teams. I think that's been one thing that I've been really enjoyed, first of all, in this role, and the teams have done the first monthly business review. So I'll just use an example. So if you have a monthly business review for your support teams, it's like, tell me for the last 12 months, how many tickets per month have you had? What's your trending, average speed of answer? What's your trending turnaround time? What's your backlog look like? Can you tell me, what are your tickets by cause and by product and things like that? The first ones are a little clunky if they've not been doing those before. Like, you get to a point where, certainly in this role, where, we invite all the leaders to the first couple ones. It's just the leadership team of that team. But again, I'm asking lots of questions like, why do you think that average speed of answer is going up or going down? Or why are tickets going up or going down? I'm going to wrestle with those. We're going to answer those questions as part of the monthly business review. Again, the first one's not going to be perfect, but they do evolve over time, right? And everybody kind of understands. You may go from measuring 20 things to like, guys, I like these 10 things. They're interesting. Maybe they're appendix type metrics. It's like, what is driving the real core of the customer experience? It's probably these 5 or 7 things.
Yeah.
So I think those monthly business reviews are really important starting from day 90. You know enough now that you can start asking questions in each one of those business reviews and help them evolve that process as well.
Yeah. And find those key metrics, find those key data points that you can have a discussion with the team about. Yeah.
And I think it's also important, you finished your 90 days. You should already have your draft OKR going into the next quarter, right? It's again going to probably be not perfect, a little rough around the edges, but I think the more that you can kind of share from 90 days going forward, your key observations about where you think you are. Like, guys, when I got here 90 days ago, here's some things I observed. Those have turned out to be true. These things true or not as important, probably not driving as much change as maybe I thought originally. But again, testing that with your team members, your leaders, your peers, the people that work above you, the ELT, or just the CEO potentially.
Yeah. Good. So stepping into action, you've now learned a bunch. Now you're going into action. Talk about at a high level. What are you trying to do by the end of that period?
So at 90 days, you should have enough information to be tying your performance to the overall organization's performance, right? So you probably walked into, let's just say, if you're in a role like myself where you're leading customer success, you should know where your gross retention, net retention numbers are, and are we trending up, are we trending down, and why are we trending up, and why are we trending up? Because you're going to be able to start reporting on that going forward by month, and what are your actions doing to drive up gross retention, net retention? What are the actions that you're taking to drive in the employee experience up or down? So you should be at a point in 90 days where you're going to begin to get into this cadence of being able to report and get feedback just more regularly now. Like, it should be more refined. The first 90 days, you're going to throw out some theories about, I think we should, again, do X, Y, or Z. And your boss is like, I think X is a really great idea. I really can't do that because of this or that. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's good to know. And you shift and change and adjust, just like you always should.
Yeah. Good. So where do you go from there in your plan?
So if the first, the 90 to 180 is what I would call step in action. The 180 to 360, I use often the, plan, do, check, act framework, or I've sometimes said measure, validate, adjust, and execute. And so that's really what you should be refining every 3 to 6 months. Are you really working on the most important things? You also broaden your network of people, right? So you're having more meetings directly with your sales team, with your product team, with your engineering teams. You know a whole lot more than you did, your first 90, especially, I guess if you're moving in from, a very, very like organization to another, even in those instances, there's a lot of differences between organization to organization. For me, I moved from on healthcare, a very provider focused technology and platform, to a very payer focused platform technology that interacts with provider, but it's very much different. The payer world's much different than the provider world in healthcare. And so I continue to this day, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
So that continuous learning is a big part of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that I've thought about throughout the years is every time you go into an organization, there's a lot to learn. There's certain jargon, there's certain ways that certain assumptions, there's certain ways that people talk, there's certain things that they understand because they've been there for a long time, that you're asking questions that sometimes you feel dumb. You're like, I don't know what that is. Tell me what that is, or tell me what this is. And a lot of people get stumped by that because they don't want to admit they don't understand what that is. And I think one of the things that you've emphasized here is you need to go in and be the person who's willing to ask the questions that other people won't ask. And so moving from one focused industry to another industry, and you've moved out of healthcare back into healthcare, I think that's one of the things that's like a pro tip, is actually go into it trying to ask the questions that no one else will ask. Try to ask the question that people are like, look at you like, why did you ask that question? Because a lot of times people have assumptions about those things. And when you ask the dumb question that they think is the dumb question, actually everyone then kind of gets alignment, which is really good.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
So I don't want to cut you off in terms of the plan, but you've gotten down to now 180 to 360. You're now kind of in this rhythm. Is there something different that you would do in the second year, or just maintain that rhythm of execution quarter to quarter, month to month?
Well, I think one of the big ones, and I touched on this a little bit, is to continuously share your progress or lack of progress up, down, and across. It's really important that everyone knows where you are, what your objectives and your key results are. I bring those to when we do business unit quarterly reviews. I always bring in my OKRs, and I'll do this at the executive level. Here's our OKRs. Here was the last quarter. Here's what they were. Here's how we delivered. Here's the next quarter. Here's what we need to be doing. Here's what we're going to deliver. And I share the same information, not just with the executive team, but I'm going to go to our town halls and I'm going to share it with all of my team members and say, hey, everyone, by the way, here's what we set out to do last quarter. Here's what we accomplished. Give yourself a pat on the back. We executed well here, or we fell short here, and here's why. And maybe we're not going to carry that objective forward, maybe we are. And so you're going to see it happen in the next quarter. So in addition to being able to demonstrate incremental or dramatic change, is that consistency that you're driving to. Like one of the ways I know that I failed my team members is if they don't understand what we're trying to achieve, right? If anybody
Mhm.
goes to one of my team members and says, "Can you tell me about what you're overall what you're trying to drive, what you and the teams are trying to drive?" And they say, "I'm not really sure," I failed. Like, so to me, that is just one of the critical things that just always have to happen. The first 90 days, and then they could be 5 years later. You should be sharing the same information so that your team's never in the dark about what's happening and never in the dark about how they're contributing to that. I think that, being able to connect performance to individuals is really, really important, right? That was one of the best things we do in these quarterly all hands. Is I love this format that I spend the first 10 to 15 minutes. I talk about what happened last quarter, what we're going to do this quarter, big picture strategy. And then I'm handing it off to my teams, and they get to talk about their teams, and they get to talk about how they contributed to that performance and who contributed to that performance. Like, they get to highlight people. And I think it just creates this connectedness to everyone, that we're
Yeah.
all in this together, and that we all share in the successes. And when we don't hit the mark, that we all understand what we need to do to achieve that in the next quarter.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot in there, that you think about in terms of how you communicate, how you use different platforms to communicate. But clearly, communication, regular communication, alignment, so people can connect their role to those parts that what you're trying to accomplish as an organization. You're very thoughtful and strategic about that, and that doesn't matter what your role is. Doesn't matter where you are sitting in an organization. That's just a leadership kind of pro tip, best practice, and that's fantastic. So you may have more to share. I don't know. Maybe we can create a kind of take some of the work that you put together and put it into something you'd be willing to share with the audience. But my last question for you, David, is you've gone through various transitions, and so you've gone through transitions that went really well. You went through transitions that you're like, oh, could have done better. What has helped you specifically accomplish successful transitions at a rapid pace?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to narrow in on that one. I think always having a strategy helps, right? Because you have a thing that you can measure yourself and your teams against, and that could be as an individual contributor, and that could be as a leader. And I think doing honest assessments of performance is really helpful. I had a leader in my last organization who, and I hesitate to, because I want to make sure that I describe her methodology here, but she had basically her performance cheat sheet, and she would spend 30 minutes or a week or so, and she would just kind of write down things that she had done really well, or things that she wanted to do better. She was an extraordinary leader and performer, and I think that a big part of that was her ability to constantly be evaluating performance. And so I would say that constantly evaluate performance, and getting feedback from her, from her peers, from her subordinates, from her leaders on is she assessing her performance accurately and correctly? Because you can always adjust. The thing that you don't want to do is get so far away from things that you have to be executing on, and just kind of get lost in the weeds. And it can happen because people are really busy. I would say 95% of your listeners are really, really busy in their roles. Like, they don't have a lot of headroom, but make the space, right, to do honest assessments. Take the time to write it down. Take the time to validate with your boss. I found my boss to be just super helpful in that, when we talk every week, he's very willing, eager to share his advice. And he asked for my advice. So, establishing those relationships with your boss and your leaders makes a massive difference.
Well, one of the things that you're saying is take the time to ask for feedback, take the time to reflect on your own performance, take time to
Yes.
to try to get a clear picture of what's really happening and how you're performing as a leader in the midst of trying to adjust and move into this organization. So that's really important. One of the things I think is true is that the higher you get in an organization, the less feedback you get. So the less actual direct insight you get on your own performance from outside, from other people. They either assume you know it or they're too busy
Absolutely.
to give it to you. So what you're talking about is really important. Is trying to take ownership of that. What have you found to be effective for you to get that type of insight on what you do that makes you unique as an executive versus the other executives in the room? You're not all the same. You bring something unique to the table, and I'm assuming that you've gotten clearer and clearer on that throughout your career. And how has that clarity helped you execute the plan that you have that you've outlined?
Yeah, I'd have to go back to the fact that, I'm not just willing to do a what I would call a thorough self-assessment, but to have people in my life and in my career universe like yourself, who, just to be transparent, our monthly, hour and a half, 2 hours of coffee every month where we can both talk through, what are the challenges. It's always super helpful for me to be able to talk to you about these are the things that I find very, very challenging. And you don't know the players in the organization. You can look at it from a 20 or 30,000 foot level and go, hey, have you thought about, so you and I can listen
Yeah,
and ask questions to each other where we can, the whole steel sharpens steel.
yeah,
And having someone that you know and trust, that the things that I do well, but you also know, hey, here are the things that I don't know if you necessarily would say don't do well, but just areas that it's not a focus for you, or you kind of fill in that gap and can help me understand that.
yeah. Well, I always think there's a consequence to not seeing ourselves accurately, and I would say you don't know until you get external insight. If you're just relying on your own perspective and just looking in the mirror, and you don't see what you do that makes you so uniquely effective, and then
That's
you
right.
don't know kind of what some of the things that where you actually shoot yourself in the foot unintentionally. I think the thing that we can do as leaders for each other, and I would say that anyone can do for a peer or a colleague, is establish that type of relationship where they're actually creating a safe conversation, regular conversation to go, hey, what are you struggling with? What are you not? Hey, here's what I see in you. Hey, remember, you get tripped up by this stuff. And having those regular conversations allows you to kind of to cycle through some of the stuff and clarify what's true versus the when we're on our own, we can be distracted and not necessarily see ourselves the way that we need to see ourselves. So that's one of the things I think is just true about us as leaders. I need that, you need that, so that they can take a step back and look at that. And I think for you, you're bringing us some really good insight about how someone can increase their path to adding value in an organization. And one of the ways is getting that insight from peers as you move through that process. People above
Yeah.
you, peers, and people below you. Yeah, that's good.
It's never too late
Yeah,
to start, right? I mean, even if you've been in your role for a year and a half and you're like, crap, I wish I would have done that in the first 30 days or 90 days. It's not too late. Some of these
yeah,
ideas are applicable even into your role, deep into your roles. Like start establishing, monthly business reviews and as a reminder, and I remind myself this all the time is listen more, talk less, listen more, talk less, ask questions, listen.
yeah,
And you need a constant reminder of that. And I totally agree with that. Having someone like you that I can have these conversations. It's going to be different. My boss is not going to have the type of honest conversations that you and I have. It is a different relationship. But yes, having a professional relationship that you can be honest with each other and grow and learn from each other is just really critically important.
yeah. And I guess just an encouragement and kind of a pro tip is being willing to ask people for their insight from their perspective on our performance is a huge risk. You got to be vulnerable to go in and go, hey, I'd like some feedback on how you think my team's doing, how you think I'm doing leading my team. Like that's a vulnerable thing that most leaders really don't do. And I think then you've had the courage to do that. I've learned so many things about some of the blind spots that I've had throughout the years that I only learned because someone else who observed me was willing to be honest with me. And there's a huge benefit to taking that type of risk.
And I don't say this because you're my friend. I say this because very few people are qualified enough to really sometimes give you the kind of feedback that not only do I trust you, but you understand leadership and coaching to a level that you can ask the right questions and respond in the right way. So, like I say, it's a privilege to be able to have these conversations with you and work with you, because there's only a handful of people that I would trust to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I would say right back at you, you are one of the longest running colleagues I think I've had where there's a truly mutual engagement back and forth in terms of encouragement, challenge, truth telling throughout the years. So very, very grateful for the fact that kind of we bumped into each other in 2012 and been sailing together ever since. Well, David, thank you very much. Very much appreciate. Look forward to our next conversation. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to No More Carbon Copies. If today's episode challenged your thinking or sparked a new idea, we'd love for you to share it or leave a review. And if you want to go deeper, take the free Leadership Blind Spots Diagnostic. It's a quick tool that helps you identify the hidden patterns holding you back and gives you practical insight to grow your leadership and your team. Just head to viveroleadership.com/diagnostic or use the QR code on the screen to take it now. We'll see you next time. Until then, lead true.